An Essay on Liberation by Herbert Marcuse quotes, An Essay on Liberation by Herbert Marcuse is a powerful critique of advanced industrial society and an exploration of the possibility of true human freedom beyond the structures of capitalist oppression. Written against the backdrop of the 1960s, it reflects Marcuse's belief that technological advancements and the development of human sensibility could bring about a radically different and liberated society. He discusses how corporate capitalism creates false needs that suppress genuine human desires and creativity, and how liberation requires not just political and economic change, but a transformation of human consciousness and values. Marcuse draws inspiration from social movements of the time, emphasizing the potential of marginalized and revolutionary forces to create new modes of freedom, solidarity, and beauty. Quote 1. In the affluent society, capitalism comes into its own. The affluent society, Marcuse argues, sees capitalism thrive as it integrates into all aspects of public and private life, fueled by the escalation of commodity production and exploitation. The resources that could bring liberation are wasted instead, supporting an economic system dependent on destruction and systematic management. The opposition manifests in rebellious acts by marginalized groups and those resisting the mechanisms of capitalism. Quote 2. This society is obscene in producing and indecently exposing a stifling abundance of wares, while depriving its victims abroad of the necessities of life. Marcuse condemns the capitalist society for its moral obscenity, highlighting how it excessively produces and consumes goods while leaving those beyond its borders in poverty. He contrasts the trivial luxuries and empty rituals of consumer culture with the grave suffering inflicted on others, pointing out the hypocrisy and aggression embedded in these societal behaviors. Quote 3. The obscene exposures of the affluent society normally provoke neither shame nor a sense of guilt, although this society violates some of the most fundamental moral taboos of civilization. Despite openly displaying its excess and moral failures, the affluent society fails to evoke a sense of guilt or shame, even as it transgresses basic moral taboos. Marcuse attributes this to the permissive liberalization of sexual norms, which alleviates guilt in personal spheres but keeps people complicit with broader systemic oppression. This paradoxical freedom ultimately strengthens people's ties to capitalist authorities. Quote 4. The refusal with which the opposition confronts the existing society is affirmative in that it envisages a new culture which fulfills the humanistic promises betrayed by the old culture. Marcuse portrays the rebellion against established society as a vision for a more humane culture that fulfills the unmet ideals of humanism. This rebellion entails a moral radicalism rooted in the instinctual desire to counter aggression and cultivate unity among people, suggesting that morality itself has the potential to become the foundation of a truly liberated society. Quote 5. The so-called consumer economy and the politics of corporate capitalism have created a second nature of man, which ties him libidinally and aggressively to the commodity form. Marcuse asserts that consumer capitalism reshapes human desires and instincts, transforming them into an attachment to commodities. This dependence on material goods stabilizes and preserves the capitalist system, as people's instinctual needs are shaped to support an economy based on consumption and market expansion, ultimately leading to a deeply ingrained counter-revolution within human nature. Quote 6. Not technology, not technique, not the machine are the engines of repression, but the presence, in them, of the masters who determine their number, their lifespan, their power, their place in life, and the need for them. Technology itself is not inherently repressive, according to Marcuse, but rather becomes a tool of domination due to the control exerted by those in power. These masters decide how technology is produced and used, ensuring it serves their interests and perpetuates societal control. The potential of technology as a means of liberation is thus curtailed by its subjugation to capitalist needs. Quote 7. The capitalist production relations are responsible not only for the servitude and toil, but also for the greater happiness and fun available to the majority of the population, and they deliver more goods than before. Marcuse acknowledges that capitalism provides unprecedented levels of comfort and goods to the population. However, he emphasizes that this does not negate the exploitation and domination inherent in the system. The abundance of commodities and the satisfaction they provide obscure the underlying inequities, making people complicit in their own servitude, which is masked as contentment and autonomy. Quote 8. The notion that happiness is an objective condition which demands more than subjective feelings has been effectively obscured. In capitalist society, Marcuse argues, the concept of true happiness has been distorted, with subjective feelings and satisfaction through consumption taking precedence. He stresses that genuine happiness should stem from collective solidarity and freedom, but such ideals remain unattainable as long as society remains divided by class, and capitalism's war of all against all persists. Quote 9. The real interest, the attainment of conditions in which man could shape his own life, was that of no longer subordinating his life to the requirements of profitable production, to an apparatus controlled by forces beyond his control? Marcuse argues that true liberation involves individuals shaping their own lives free from the dictates of a capitalist system that prioritizes profit over human needs. He suggests that the real interest lies in creating conditions where individuals are no longer subordinated to an apparatus that controls their existence through exploitation and profit-driven motives. To achieve such a transformation, the abolition of capitalism is necessary, allowing people to live autonomously and without the constraints imposed by profit-focused production. Quote 10. The power of corporate capitalism has stifled the emergence of such a consciousness and imagination. Its mass media have adjusted the rational and emotional faculties to its market and its policies, and steered them to defense of its dominion. Marcuse explains how corporate capitalism suppresses the development of a revolutionary consciousness by shaping both rational and emotional faculties through mass media. The media plays a crucial role in aligning people's thoughts and feelings with the interests of the capitalist system, ensuring their loyalty. By adjusting people's desires and perceptions, capitalism prevents the emergence of a consciousness that could challenge its dominion, thereby maintaining its stability and power. Quote 11. In the advanced capitalist countries, the radicalization of the working classes is counteracted by a socially engineered arrest of consciousness, and by the development and satisfaction of needs which perpetuate the servitude of the exploited. Marcuse argues that advanced capitalist societies have managed to neutralize the revolutionary potential of the working class by systematically halting their consciousness and fulfilling needs that maintain their subjugation. This engineered contentment makes the working class complicit in their own exploitation, as their needs and desires are shaped to align with the existing system. This adaptation results in a lack of revolutionary drive, as workers become invested in the comforts and stability provided by the capitalist structure, thus preventing a genuine break from their exploitation. Quote 12. Capitalist progress thus not only reduces the environment of freedom, the open space of the human existence, but also the longing, the need for such an environment. Marcuse critiques capitalist progress for not only diminishing the physical and mental space needed for human freedom, but also for eliminating the desire for such an environment. As capitalism expands, it limits the scope of individual autonomy and suppresses the instinctual longing for freedom. By creating a society where people no longer yearn for anything beyond the controlled existence it offers, capitalism ensures that its influence over human life remains unchallenged, stifling the possibility of liberation or meaningful change. Quote 13. Freedom indeed depends largely on technical progress, on the advancement of science, But this fact easily obscures the essential precondition. In order to become vehicles of freedom, science and technology would have to change their present direction and goals. Marcuse acknowledges that technological progress is essential for achieving freedom, but he stresses that true liberation can only occur if science and technology are reoriented toward human needs rather than serving the interests of the capitalist system. For technology to become an instrument of freedom, it must break away from its current path, which is determined by profit motives and the needs of domination. Instead, technology should be shaped by the demands of human instincts and life, fostering a society without exploitation and allowing for authentic freedom. Quote 14. The new sensibility, which expresses the ascent of the life instincts over aggressiveness and guilt, would foster, on a social scale, the vital need for the abolition of injustice and misery and would shape the further evolution of the standard of living. Marcuse discusses the emergence of a new sensibility that emphasizes the life instincts, prioritizing the abolition of social injustices and human suffering. This new sensibility is envisioned as fostering a different set of values that contrast with the aggressive and guilt-ridden impulses of capitalist society. It aims to redefine the standard of living by focusing on human fulfillment and the satisfaction of essential needs, thereby laying the groundwork for a liberated society. Such a sensibility would allow individuals to interact with science and technology in ways that enhance life, free from exploitation and oppression. Quote 15. Technique would then tend to become art, and art would tend to form reality. The opposition between imagination and reason, higher and lower faculties, poetic and scientific thought, would be invalidated. Marcuse suggests that under a liberated society, the boundary between technology and art would dissolve, leading to a reality where creative imagination and rational thought coexist harmoniously. The rigid separation between different types of thought, imaginative versus rational, poetic versus scientific, would be transcended, allowing individuals to experience life as an aesthetic creation. This blending of technique and art would facilitate the realization of human potential, leading to a world shaped by both sensibility and rationality, in which everyday activities take on a creative and fulfilling dimension. Quote 16. The political action which insists on a new morality and a new sensibility as preconditions and results of social change occurs at a point at which the repressive rationality that has brought about the achievements of industrial society becomes utterly regressive. Marcuse explains that the demand for a new morality and sensibility is both a prerequisite and a consequence of meaningful political action, especially in a society where rationality has turned repressive. The very rationality that enabled the achievements of industrial society has now become an obstacle to true human progress, serving to maintain control and repression. For real change to occur, a new sensibility, guided by imagination and non-repressive rationality, must emerge to challenge this rationality and lead the way to a society characterized by freedom and creativity, rather than domination and control. Quote 17. The new sensibility has become, by this very token, praxis. It emerges in the struggle against violence and exploitation, where this struggle is waged for essentially new ways and forms of life. Marcuse asserts that the new sensibility is not just a concept, but becomes an active practice that arises from the fight against violence and exploitation. This sensibility is reflected in the quest for fundamentally different ways of life that reject the established systems of power and oppression. By challenging existing norms and promoting a culture that embraces sensuality, creativity, and authenticity, this new sensibility forms the foundation for a liberated society. It is through this praxis that the struggle for freedom gains its transformative potential, aiming to build a society that values beauty, creativity, and genuine human fulfillment over aggression and dominance. Quote 18. Today's rebels want to see, hear, feel new things in a new way. They link liberation with the dissolution of ordinary and orderly perception. Marcuse explains that contemporary rebellion is rooted in a desire for a different kind of sensory experience, one that challenges the established norms of perception. The rebels are not content with the conventional ways of seeing, hearing, and feeling that have been shaped by a society focused on control and exploitation. Instead, they seek to break free from these limitations, linking their quest for liberation with a radical transformation in how they perceive and experience the world. This desire for a new sensorium reflects the deeper aspiration for a fundamental change in society's values, seeking a reality that goes beyond the constraints of established sensibilities. Quote 19. The radical transformation of society implies the union of the new sensibility with a new rationality. Marcuse suggests that a true societal transformation requires a synthesis of the new sensibility with a new kind of rationality. This new rationality must be free from the repressive forces of the established order, allowing sensibility and imagination to guide practical and theoretical reason. Such a transformation would enable society to reconstruct itself in a way that prioritizes human needs and fulfillment, rather than maintaining systems of domination and exploitation. By merging sensibility with rationality, Marcuse envisions a harmonious reconstruction of society in which art and reason work together to create a world shaped by creativity, freedom, and solidarity. Quote 20. Art alters experience by reconstructing the objects of experience, reconstructing them in word, tone, image. Marcuse emphasizes that art has the power to transform our experience of reality by reshaping how we perceive objects through language, sound, and imagery. This transformative potential allows art to break away from the familiar and challenge the established perceptions imposed by society. By reconstructing objects in ways that differ from how they are conventionally understood, art becomes a medium through which individuals can transcend their habitual experience and envision new possibilities. This power of art to reframe reality is essential in challenging the status quo and fostering a new sensibility that is aligned with liberation and creative freedom. Quote 21. The redeeming, reconciling power of art adheres even to the most radical manifestations of non-illusory art and anti-art. Marcuse argues that even in its most radical forms, art retains an inherent power to reconcile and redeem, offering a sense of order and meaning to human experience. This reconciliatory quality is present even in non-illusory or anti-art movements that aim to break from traditional forms. Despite their intent to reject conventional aesthetics, these works still create their own form and structure, thus providing a sense of resolution and catharsis. This characteristic of art reveals its paradox. While it can challenge established norms and express rebellion, it also has the potential to pacify and integrate those challenges into a broader framework of meaning, thereby reducing the impact of its critique. Quote 22. The achievements of science and technology permit the play of the productive imagination. Experimentation with the possibilities of form and matter hitherto enclosed in the density of unmastered nature. Marcuse discusses how technological advancements enable new forms of creativity and experimentation. The progress of science and technology makes it possible to engage in creative experimentation with the materials of the world, liberating them from their former constraints. This process allows for a loosening of rigid structures and opens up new possibilities for the transformation of the natural environment. By suggesting that these transformations can lead to a world that is lighter, easier, and more aesthetically pleasing, Marcuse highlights the potential of technology to serve liberatory and artistic purposes, rather than merely fulfilling the demands of exploitation. Quote 23. This same trend of production and consumption, which makes for the affluence and attraction of advanced capitalism, makes for the perpetuation of the struggle for existence, for the increasing necessity to produce and consume the non-necessary. Marcuse points out a paradox within advanced capitalism. The same processes that generate wealth and abundance also intensify the struggle for existence. The system creates new luxuries and expands them into perceived necessities, making individuals compete for these newly manufactured needs. This dynamic perpetuates the cycle of production and consumption, trapping people in a system that compels them to produce and consume goods that are not truly necessary. Despite the technological capability to eliminate scarcity and create a life of freedom and leisure, capitalism maintains a state of artificial need, keeping people tethered to the struggle for survival. Quote 24. The new consciousness and the instinctual rebellion isolate such opposition from the masses and from the majority of organized labor, the integrated majority, and make for the concentration of radical politics in active minorities, mainly among the young middle-class intelligentsia and among the ghetto populations. Marcuse explains that the emerging consciousness, which rejects the values of capitalist society, tends to isolate those who hold it from the broader population. This new awareness and instinctual rebellion are not widespread among the masses or organized labor, which have largely been integrated into the capitalist system. As a result, the radical opposition is concentrated within small, active groups, particularly among the young middle-class intelligentsia and marginalized populations, such as those living in ghettos. These groups, driven by their dissatisfaction with the established order, embody the potential for political change, even though their numbers are small compared to the mainstream populace. Quote 25. The development of a radical political consciousness among the masses is conceivable only if and when the economic stability and the social cohesion of the system begin to weaken. Marcuse argues that the spread of a revolutionary consciousness among the general population can only happen if the capitalist system starts to falter economically and socially. As long as the system remains stable and prosperous, the masses are unlikely to develop the awareness necessary for radical change. It is only when economic stability begins to crumble and social cohesion starts to fracture that the working class and other oppressed groups may become open to revolutionary ideas. Until such conditions emerge, the development of a radical political consciousness will largely depend on small, catalytic groups that attempt to educate and mobilize others in preparation for potential systemic breakdowns. Quote 26. To be sure, there are the wild ones and the non-committed, the escapists into all kinds of mysticism, the good fools and the bad fools, and those who don't care what happens. There are the authentic and the organized happenings and non-conformities. Marcuse acknowledges the diversity within the movement against capitalism, recognizing that it is composed of different kinds of individuals. Among them are those who are non-committal or seek escapism through mysticism, as well as those who are naive or indifferent. Yet, alongside these elements are also the genuine and organized efforts at nonconformity and rebellion. Marcuse's depiction of the varied nature of the opposition emphasizes the complexity of the movement, which contains both serious activists and those who may not fully understand or engage with the deeper implications of the struggle. This complexity reflects the multifaceted nature of rebellion in the face of a deeply entrenched system. Quote 27. The rebels revive the desperate laughter and the cynical defiance of the fool as means for demasking the deeds of the serious ones who govern the whole. Marcuse describes how the rebels use humor, satire, and irony as tools to expose the contradictions and hypocrisy of those in power. This laughter and defiance serve as a way to reveal the truth behind the serious facade of the political establishment, highlighting how the values professed by those in power are systematically betrayed. By adopting the perspective of the fool, the rebels effectively disrupt the serious, institutionalized rhetoric of politics, turning it into an object of ridicule. This tactic not only mocks the established order, but also challenges its legitimacy, making visible the falsehoods upon which it stands. Quote 28. The mass democracy developed by monopoly capitalism has shaped the rights and liberties which it grants in its own image and interest. Marcuse argues that the rights and liberties offered by modern capitalist democracies are ultimately shaped to serve the interests of the ruling powers. Under monopoly capitalism, the democratic system and its supposed freedoms are designed in a way that reinforces the existing power structure rather than genuinely empowering the people. The democratic process is manipulated to maintain control, allowing only limited deviations that do not threaten the status quo. As a result, even the mechanisms intended to allow dissent are co-opted to ensure that any opposition remains ineffective, thus preserving the hegemony of capitalist interests over society. Quote 29. The semi-democratic process works of necessity against radical change because it produces and sustains a popular majority whose opinion is generated by the dominant interests in the status quo. Marcuse points out that the democratic system under capitalism inherently works against radical transformation because it is structured to create and maintain a compliant majority. The opinions and desires of the masses are shaped by the ruling powers, who use their control over media and public discourse to promote values that sustain the existing system. As long as this manipulation of public opinion continues, true revolutionary change is unlikely to gain widespread support. Consequently, the so-called will of the people is often aligned with maintaining the status quo, rather than challenging or transforming it into something more just or equitable. Quote 30. An opposition which is directed not against a particular form of government or against particular conditions within a society, but against a given social system as a whole, cannot remain legal and lawful because it is the established legality and the established law which it opposes. Marcuse explains that when opposition movements aim to challenge the entire social system, rather than specific policies or forms of governance, they inevitably come into conflict with the legal framework of that system. The laws of an established society are designed to protect the existing order, so any effort to fundamentally change or overthrow that order will be considered illegal. This means that true revolutionary movements cannot operate solely within the boundaries of legality, as they seek to dismantle the very structures that define what is legal. Such opposition must transcend the established laws if it is to achieve meaningful systemic change. Quote 31. The established democracy still provides the only legitimate framework for change and must therefore be defended against all attempts on the right and the center to restrict this framework. But, at the same time, preservation of the established democracy preserves the status quo and the containment of change. Marcuse acknowledges the paradox inherent in defending existing democratic institutions. On one hand, these institutions are the only legitimate means available for enacting social change and must be protected from attacks by reactionary forces. On the other hand, maintaining the current democratic system also means upholding the status quo, which inherently limits the possibility of radical transformation. This contradiction places the opposition in a difficult position, as they must work within a system that simultaneously enables and restricts their efforts to achieve genuine liberation and fundamental change. Quote 32. The search for specific historical agents of revolutionary change in the advanced capitalist countries is indeed meaningless. Revolutionary forces emerge in the process of change itself. The translation of the potential into the actual is the work of political practice. Marcuse argues that attempting to identify specific revolutionary agents in advanced capitalist societies is futile. Instead, revolutionary forces come into being during the process of social transformation itself. This transformation occurs when potential is translated into actual change through political action. Marcuse emphasizes that revolutionary movements are dynamic and emerge in response to changing conditions rather than being predetermined by existing social groups. The realization of these revolutionary potentials depends on the concrete practice of political struggle that reshapes society from within. Quote 33. The dynamic of this society has long since passed the stage where it could grow on its own resources, its own market, and on normal trade with other areas. It has grown into an imperialist power which, through economic and technical penetration and outright military intervention, has transformed large parts of the Third World into dependencies. Marcuse asserts that the capitalist system has surpassed the stage where it could sustain itself through internal growth and normal trade. Instead, it has evolved into an imperialist power, relying on economic penetration and military intervention to maintain control over the Third World, effectively transforming these regions into economic dependencies. This imperialist expansion is driven by a need to secure resources and markets beyond its borders, revealing the inherent instability and unsustainable nature of capitalism. Marcuse highlights that the expansionist dynamic of capitalism is a fundamental feature that creates dependencies and reinforces inequalities on a global scale. Quote 34. The national liberation fronts threaten the lifeline of imperialism. They are not only a material, but also an ideological catalyst of change. Marcuse argues that national liberation fronts, such as those in Vietnam and Cuba, pose a significant threat to imperialist powers. Their struggle represents more than just a material challenge to the global capitalist system. It also serves as an ideological inspiration for movements seeking to dismantle oppression. These liberation struggles exemplify the possibility of resisting powerful imperialist forces, thereby inspiring radical movements within capitalist countries. The success of these external revolutions demonstrates that a different, more humane, and just world is possible, providing an important ideological counterpoint to the capitalist status quo. Quote 35. The dissolution of social morality may manifest itself in a collapse of work discipline, slowdown, spread of disobedience to rules and regulations, wildcat strikes, boycotts, sabotage, gratuitous acts of non-compliance. Marcuse suggests that the disintegration of established social morality could lead to widespread non-compliance and disruption within capitalist society. This breakdown might manifest in various forms, such as diminished work discipline, spontaneous strikes, boycotts, or other acts of resistance that challenge the rules and norms imposed by the system. These actions reflect a growing disillusionment with the prevailing order and a refusal to participate in its repressive mechanisms. Such disruptions can contribute to the overall weakening of capitalist stability by undermining its ability to function smoothly and maintain control over the population. Quote 36. In short, the economic, political, and cultural features of a classless society must have become the basic needs of those who fight for it. Marcuse emphasizes that for a revolutionary movement to be successful, the fundamental features of a classless society must already be internalized as needs by those who fight for it. This means that the values, goals, and relationships that characterize a liberated society must be embodied in the present struggle for change. Only when the desire for solidarity, equality, and freedom becomes an essential, instinctual need for the people involved in the movement can true revolutionary transformation take place. This ingression of future ideals into present action helps ensure that the revolutionary struggle remains authentic and directed toward the realization of a genuinely free society. An essay on liberation by Herbert Marcuse concludes by reaffirming the necessity for a profound transformation in both society and individual sensibility, aiming for a world where technological progress serves humanity rather than domination. Marcuse highlights the importance of a new sensibility that transcends capitalist values and the need for collective action in achieving genuine freedom. The book leaves readers with a vision of a liberated society, one that breaks free from exploitative systems and is guided by a new set of values that prioritize human needs, solidarity, and the potential for a more aesthetic, fulfilling way of life.
Curious to dive into the mind of Herbert Marcuse? With StudyLab Pro's book GPT, it's possible. Ask questions, explore themes, and discover the depths of an essay on liberation in an entirely new way. Start your conversation now by clicking on our logo. And if you're hungry for more educational content, subscribe to our channel to keep discovering, learning, and growing. Want more than just videos? Click on our logo now to join us on our platform for multiple choice tests, in-depth content, and tools to help you ace your studies. Get started now.